All right, the holiday weekend of sorts is now over. The madness that is the NFL draft is finally over, and that means one thing: to pick it apart and to criticize it, or to praise it and to give our draft analysis, when in reality we probably can't really do this for 3 to 5 years, so we'll hopefully get back together and and do this again and pick it apart when we're years older. This, though, is another edition of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, brought to you by Beaver County Auto, up above Market Square here in downtown Pittsburgh. I am, of course, your host, Mike Asti, and this is normally the host of the Corner 3 here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, so a plug for you there.
Yes.
Cale Berger also was a part of our NFL draft show at Walnut Grill, and again, thanks to Walnut Grill for the feast and the pretzel bites, if nothing else.
The pretzel bites were elite.
They were elite.
Definitely a first-round draft pick.
Absolutely.
The nachos with the, I think they're brisket on there.
Yeah, brisket
the
nachos.
Were,
absolutely, yes.
I would trade up in the first round for those as well.
Yeah, and I was a little jealous, and I would have traded up for maybe one of those burgers that I saw Mike Vukovic and Alan Saunders had. I was wondering a couple times what Alan was doing when he was getting up, and he was having a burger. Hosting the show, I was a little distracted. I wasn't able to get up. You guys had me kind of blocked in, barricaded there. So I was a little jealous, but I did enjoy the food that I had. And thanks again to Walnut Grill. We will be back there again. And we also, one day we will learn the waitress's name, but we want to once again give another shout out to her for her service and the fact.
She was incredibly patient with us.
She was, and she also stayed extra. I mean, hopefully they got some OT or something, because that was beyond closing time.
You know what, also, very thankful that the Steelers traded up, because we were going to go all the way until the Steelers pick. And,
right,
yeah. The first
that would have been a problem.
Incredibly long, which apparently the NFL had told teams wait until at least 5 minutes are gone on the clock so we can stretch it out for TV purposes.
Right.
Which made that first round so much lengthier than normal.
Yeah.
And I guess a blessing in disguise for us that the Steelers ended up trading early, and a blessing in disguise for the staff of Walnut Grill. They can go home early and maybe catch the final few picks of the first round.
Yeah, so you're saying the NFL and ESPN and the TV family, they didn't really think of Pittsburgh Steelers now and us being at the Walnut Grill and that whole. They didn't really care about us.
Very inconsiderate.
Yeah, I mean, you could honestly argue. Yeah, Steelers now did not appreciate it, but it worked out. We were able to put some feelers into Kevin Colbert and let him know that, hey, we're going to need you to trade up and do this, because otherwise we're not going to get the show in. And I would have been interested to see whether the Walnut Grill would have kicked us out at 1 a.m. I would imagine so.
You know what?
If that's how long that went.
I hope they would have. Just because, if I was in that situation, I know what I would probably do.
Right.
Regardless.
Right. Well, regardless, and then I had my nice little weekend where I pretty much slept at the Steelers facility. But I will thank the Steelers staff for the glorious food and the barbecue glazed salmon, and then even getting a catered slate of wings and sandwiches on the weekend when normally the chef's not there. So again, 2 thumbs up. Grade A+ for the food at the Steelers facility and the staff at Walnut Grill for our Steelers Now coverage up until the Steelers pick, and then a little bit after, because as we said, and this is how we'll lead in, they did trade up. The Steelers trading up and getting Devin Bush. We'll throw a little graphic there as Roddy Piper about to fall over. But the Steelers bring in Devin Bush. They get the linebacker out of Michigan, the guy that they apparently were coveting, and despite the smoke screens from Kevin Colbert and Mike Tomlin days before the draft, Devin Bush was the guy they wanted. And from what Devin Bush told us, actually, in media, in his press conference, that he kind of knew this was going to happen as well. It was the worst kept secret in the draft. Many, including myself, was skeptical that it would happen and didn't even want it to happen, because I was assuming the Steelers were going to have to give up too much, and it was going to be too much of an ask. But it turned out it really was not that much of an ask. They were able to trade up, take the Broncos pick, trade with the Broncos, and take Devin Bush, and start off the draft on an incredible note where you find that replacement and you fill that need that has been void since Ryan Shazier's injury. And despite Devin Bush getting a little sorely with us and not wanting that comparison, in all intents and purposes, that is what he is replacing. So as we get into things here, number one, what do you think of the Bush pick, and in terms of what can it do as an immediate impact for the Steelers?
Well, as I talked about during our draft show, I was very excited about this pick, and I thought it was fantastic at the time.
Yeah.
In hindsight, a few days later, I still think it's a really great pick for the Steelers.
Okay.
Devin Bush, the inside linebacker out of Michigan, a South Florida product, which, quick plug for my hometown, the 954 Broward County had more draft picks than
Okay.
any state. So, obviously, he's another example of the great talent that comes from that hot.
Could have been you, but you were you're playing around.
Yeah, 5 inches too short too.
Could have been you, but you're playing.
But really love the pick, and the Steelers. They talked about ahead of the draft. They said, we take the best player available. We draft based on.
They did tell me that.
We don't draft based on need. Well, you know what? That's a load of malarkey because they clearly identified a need and went and satisfied it and went and took care of business and did exactly what they needed to do with that first pick at number 10. I think they also we saw from the Steelers they learned from their lesson. Is last year their offseason, one of the big things was you had to figure out the middle linebacker position, just like this offseason. You had to try and find somebody to replace Ryan Shazier.
And they kind of avoided it
and they did.
in the draft, especially, which Parker brought up on the show.
They didn't pick a linebacker in the draft. They went out and signed John Bostic, a guy who'd been on, 6 teams in 5 years, or 5 teams in 6 years, something along those lines. So not really a proven guy that really could fill the void of Ryan Shazier. And you know what? I think they identified that was the biggest problem for their defense, probably all last year, or at least one of a few, the most glaring one. And they went out and decided, we're not going to fool around. We're going to do exactly what we think we need to do to make this team better. And they went out and they got a fantastic talent in Devin Bush, and a guy who I think is going to be able to contribute right away and is going to give this defense some much-needed speed, instincts, and just a guy who can play sideline to sideline and make tackles in space. And I kept harping back to this on the draft show, but a guy that is the modern linebacker, the guy that can play in the modern NFL, that can guard tight ends and running backs on third down and in space. A guy that has that length and that speed and the range to get sideline to sideline, to tackle, on the bubble screens or whatever kind of new age offensive schemes we're seeing.
Right.
You need that modern linebacker. And the other guy in the draft was Devin White, who went a few picks earlier. They got the second of the two Devins, but still a guy who is, I think, perfect to fill that role in the 2019 NFL.
Yeah. Now, any thoughts in terms of a concern? Because Keith Butler was asked a lot of this in his media session, that the Steelers had a linebacker heavy draft, they had a defensive heavy draft. You could argue they filled the needs, especially with Devin Bush, who is also who he coveted for seemingly more than a year. So maybe they didn't even go get their inside linebacker last year in the draft because they were targeting Devin Bush for this season. Maybe the whole Bostic thing was just scotch tape for a year, which it's hard to give them that excuse because they were trying to win a championship last year.
Yes.
Which did not work out, and Bostic has been officially released after the drafting of Devin Bush and company. But he did get a lot of questions on Devin Bush's only knock is he is relatively undersized. The entire group now of linebackers is relatively undersized. Yeah. And he defended it by that you need more speed, and maybe you don't get that speed with guys that are bigger and bulkier. But even in comparison to other teams currently in the league, the Steelers are relatively undersized now at that position. Is that a concern?
I don't think it's a concern. Like I talked about, those guys are, especially Devin Bush, are built to play in space, and this is exactly right. They need guys with speed. That's what Devin Bush provides. But, I'm not a big believer in this guy is not as good as others, or this guy is lesser of a player because of his size and measurables. I mean, he's still 5'11", 240 or so?
He's big for us, but...
Still, of course, but... No, he plays much bigger than he is,
right?
And he's still a physical presence out there on the field. So I'm not really concerned about the size of this linebacker group at all.
I'm imagining, and this was even true with T.J. Watt, who wasn't necessarily undersized, you're going to gain bulk and muscle through your progression in the NFL. Even throughout the summer, I would imagine he'll gain 10 pounds a month.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm not concerned with the size or the measurables, I guess the physique of these guys as much as if they go out on the field and make plays. And Devin Bush is a guy who has proven time and time again over his time in Michigan that he is a guy who's able to do that, and a guy who's able to compete at a high level against the best competition, whether it's been the Notre Dames, the Ohio States. He shined in those games as well. So I'm not concerned with the size of this linebacker group at all. I just think what we need, like we talked about, we can't really judge this until 3 years down the line.
Right.
We need to see what they'll do on the field. But from what I've seen on tape and what I've seen in my experience watching Devin Bush all the way since high school is he's a guy that's going to be all over the field making plays, and that's exactly what I think the Steelers got.
Now, sticking on defense a bit here, the Steelers do kind of fix the secondary. That was the other issue because they didn't trade up and get Devin Bush. Many thought maybe Greedy Williams, who goes to the Browns, or many thought that the secondary would be where they were targeting. Justin Lane, Michigan State, 83rd overall pick to the Steelers. Thoughts there, because it wasn't necessarily a guy that got much in terms of mocking to Pittsburgh, obviously. That was not, didn't include the trading up, but even if they were going to stay at 20, that wasn't where they would go. Now, they had to have a different pool of corners because when you're at 20 and when you're 83rd overall pick, that's a whole different slot of guys. But we mentioned a lot on the draft show that it wasn't as deep. There wasn't that many truly elite players that could fill that secondary void. And that's the only risk. They go get their guy in Devin Bush, but then they move into now a worst column for the secondary help for the corners and have to go down lower in their value from even where Greedy Williams is. So especially in comparison to what other teams did in their division, like the Browns, what are your thoughts on a Justin Lane selection that still leaves some question marks there in the secondary, even if now they're shoring up the D-line and the linebackers? They haven't fully fixed the entire defense and their issues.
Yeah, they didn't get one of the top flight corners, but I still think they got a very talented guy that under the tutelage of maybe some veterans like a Joe Hayden, and once he gets in an NFL locker room, gets with NFL coaches, I think he'll just continue to improve. But I think you look at the length of Justin Lane, the cornerback out of Michigan State. He's 6'2", 190, so really good size for what they want in the modern corner in the NFL. But he's got really good route recognition, and part of that is because he was originally recruited to Michigan State as a wide receiver, so he does a great job kind of mirroring the routes of the receivers.
Right.
He does a good job of recognizing those routes. My one thing is he's not really willing to support the run very much. He's not a guy who's going to stick his nose in there and create tackles. Watching him on film against,
that might be an issue for what we're going to discuss here in a minute in the show.
Exactly, yeah. Watching him on film, and that was kind of a knock on Greedy Williams as well, who was, pretty much the consensus top corner. Is he was a guy who's not going to go in there and try to make tackles in the run game. That's definitely not Justin Lane either. You look at his film. He had a fantastic game against Ohio State. That's probably his best game that I've seen on film, where he had a sack in that game. He had deflections. I mean, he had 15 pass breakups last season. So he's his length and his ability to get in there and draw the ball loose and mirror the receiver are very good. But he does have those issues of he doesn't really get off the blocks well on the perimeter. He isn't a guy who's
things that can be coached though. He's going to be a coached player. Now, do you feel he can flip the field? Because that was another thing the Steelers needed from the secondary. They haven't had in 3 or 4 years, which is maybe why there could be an argument, and I'm certainly supporting of the Devin Bush trade-up, but to maybe stay at 20 and get a Greedy Williams because he was the number one guy that could flip the field and cause those turnovers. Yeah. They weren't getting interceptions. They weren't flipping the field, and if you would have flipped the field in a few of those games last year, even with all the drama and all the chaos, they would have been a playoff team. Yeah. They're going to still need that, and that seems to still be something that they're lacking, unless, which is maybe why they're able to go get Devin Bush. And this is what they defended themselves a lot in. What about the secondary? Steven Nelson coming over. They did do some secondary work in the offseason. They were able to bring in a corner, which is rare for them. So they fixed it there. But do you feel there's an ability to flip the field now?
I think there is. I mean, like I talked about, as he was that former wide receiver. I'm pretty sure he was an all-state wide receiver in Ohio coming out of Cleveland. Okay. But he has really good ball skills. He has good timing on jump balls, and he used that length as well, where he can reach up and make the difficult catches, and so I think he will be able to create some turnovers. He had a knack for doing that. He did only have 3 interceptions over his 2
right.
years.
That's what I'm saying. The numbers aren't there.
Yeah, but he is. I read in one of the scouting reports, he is a guy that I think has more of a tendency to settle for the pass breakups than to going full on for the interception. If that makes sense. Okay. He's not a guy who's gonna. Okay. He's not a ball hawk where he's going to jump every route.
I guess that's the word. I feel like the Steelers need a ball hawk they haven't had in 4 years. Yes. And maybe coaching could get him to maybe go for those interceptions. But after a while, if he's just breaking up the passes and they're not flipping the field, that's going to be the next step of coaching. They're going to need that. Yeah.
He's not a ball hawk, but he does have good ball skills. He has good timing on jump ball, one-on-one kind of situations. So I think he has the potential, but like you said, it's going to be coaching for him that's really going to turn him into that ball hawk, because I think he has the skills to do it. He has good speed. He has that length, like I talked about, but it's going to come down to coaching.
All right, now before we get, speaking of coaching here, as we've done a few of these, so
Fantastic transitions.
we're transitioning like crazy here. Before we get to the offensive side of the ball, which was so much of the drama this past season and so many of my other shows, and that has been fixed, and the Brown picks have been used, and we'll get to our now retrospective of that Brown trade based on what we saw here from the draft here in a second. But does this now, especially with such a defensive-heavy draft, and the fact that Ryan Shazier's replacement is seemingly now been put on this roster, does this put Keith Butler on even a hotter seat? Because he was the guy that continuously has been receiving all this rope. I mean, Joey Porter's been fired. Todd Haley was ushered out the door after he was being pushed at Tequila Cowboy. The fans were all in the ire of Todd Haley when they were actually scoring points in that playoff game against the Jaguars. Despite all, Todd Haley was a bit of a basket case at times and deserved some criticism, but despite all of that, the numbers were actually saying they were scoring still, and the defense was what was collapsing and the reason why they lost in the playoffs, and then even hurt them last season at times. So this now would be several years in the Keith Butler experiment. He has the playing experience, and he understands it's a different NFL. He did tell us when we asked him that he is willing to adjust. He does have some new schemes. He wants to get faster. He's not worried about being undersized either, and feels the roster is now deeper. That's all great, but I feel like I don't know how, will he get, I guess the better question is, will he get to be around for this entire maturation process, or is he going to be a bridge to somebody else to reap the rewards? Because if there is a little bit of an undersized issue with Devin Bush, he might need a season to truly bulk up and understand things. Same thing with Lane and company. And if that goes on, then will he get enough time? How hot is the seat now for Keith Butler?
Well, I think the seat was hot coming into the draft, and I think it's still hot going forward because this Steelers defense is certainly it hasn't been fantastic, I guess you could say. It hasn't been great over the last few years, and that loss to Jacksonville in the playoff game was certainly a microcosm of a lot of their problems they were having. I think there's a team that still, we haven't seen anything yet, but a team that still, doesn't necessarily tackle well,
right.
I would say. A team that has the tendency to get just completely blown out of the water in pass coverage at times.
Right.
And a team where only one guy, I think, is consistently getting to the quarterback as a pass rusher in TJ Watt. So if we can see improvements in those areas.
And you could argue he needs the least coaching. You could argue, I don't know how much credit we want to give Keith Butler for TJ Watt.
Exactly.
Everybody, I mean, we would have drafted him.
Exactly. So I think if we see improvements from all those kind of areas this season, I think that he'll be fine. But I don't think any of his him being on the hot seat has anything really to do with Devin Bush. Because I will say that the issues that this defense had once Ryan Shazier got hurt, I think were kind of out of his control. And although they did try to fill some of those holes, but they lost a lot of speed when they lost him. And they get Devin Bush back now, but it is going to take, I think, Devin Bush some time. So maybe that is an opportunity where, if the inside linebacker situation doesn't improve, we can't put that all on Keith Butler. Devin Bush does need some time. But I think in those other areas, in the tackling, in the coverage in the back end of the secondary, especially the safety play, and other guys pressuring the quarterback. If those areas don't improve, then I think that the situation becomes more dire for Keith Butler. But I don't really think it has anything to do directly with the play of Devin Bush and what we see from him in year one.
All right. Well, the Steelers certainly felt like they fixed a lot of the defensive issues. They patched up the holes, the clear needs defensively, and Keith Butler is going to be now on the hot seat, at least more so than before. But he may have the advantage of these holes now have been fixed. They have a deeper group, and the Devin Bush situation now feels like they're more secure at inside linebacker. It was a gaping hole. So they're a team that obviously they kept saying they wanted to go best available, but when you have a glaring need, it works out. And they really didn't have to give up that much to go best available, who was their need in Devin Bush. They really got a best available and filled the need all in one. Now, though, part of the Steelers draft was not just the defensive side of the ball, which was a clear issue going back to even the playoff game against the Jaguars. It was also the fact that they lost Jesse James, the tight end, who was a great pass-catching tight end, the Penn State product. He's now in Detroit. They weren't going to match that money. He's taking his money and going to Detroit. They had to replace. Le'Veon Bell has been gone now for 2 years. They felt like they needed some protection at running back. James Conner became a Pro Bowler, but still is prone to fumbling and has had his injury issues. He's not been able to stay on the field throughout an entire season, even going back to college and even in high school. And then, of course, the wide receiver issue and trying to add some protection for Juju, who's now going to be the Lone Ranger as the elite wide receiver. Antonio Brown in Oakland. It's going to make it harder on Juju because he's going to get the double coverage now. Ben does praise Jesse Washington and feels like he can step up and take that spot, but whether he does, whether he does not, there need to be more in the wide receiver group, and that's Diontae Johnson. So the Steelers, as we said, they move on Benny Snell Jr. at running back, adding some protection there in the backfield. Zach Gentry, Diontae Johnson, etc. They go in some linebackers late in the draft, which we'll get to in a second again. But in terms of the offensive side of the ball, did they do enough, and did they get the right guys to try to add the patchwork and fix their needs there?
Well, first things first with Diontae Johnson. I really like the pick, and to be honest, I have full faith and trust in Kevin Colbert and the Steelers front office to make a good selection of wide receiver. You look at that track record, and it's Antonio Brown, Emmanuel Sanders,
right? Yeah.
Davis Bryant, even though it's kind of a head case.
Right.
I mean, they have been and Juju, obviously, they've been so good at drafting wide receivers that I have full confidence in them that they made a good decision in drafting.
Yeah, AB, what, 6th-round pick? I mean, they've been getting even late-round picks and turning them into something.
But Diontae Johnson, when you look at his tape, the wide receiver out of Toledo, you know what he looks like to me? He looks exactly like Antonio Brown 2.0. I mean, you look at his stature, he ran a similar 40 time, his style of play. I mean, he is a guy that you get the ball in his hands, he's going to make plays, he's shifty. He also can be a factor in the return game as well, similar to Antonio Brown was, who's an incredibly dangerous returner until he got too good a receiver that they said, you're not returning kicks anymore.
Which could happen here.
But the other thing, too, that I like about Diontae Johnson is, obviously played at a MAC school, and the Steelers have had a lot of success drafting guys from the MAC, whether it be Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, others are escaping me, but they made a lot of good decisions. James Harrison was another one.
Yeah.
So they had a lot of success in the MAC, and they certainly talked about that after the draft also. But you look at his performance against the top schools, and in this game last season against Miami, University of Miami, not the Redhawks, Miami of Ohio, he had 6 catches, 119 yards, and 2 TDs in that game against one of the best secondaries in all of college football in the Miami Hurricanes. So this guy showed up for the big games and showed up against that elite Power 5 talent as well. He also had a big game in the MAC championship game in 2017 on a big stage also, where he had 118 yards and 2 touchdowns in that and 9 catches. So this guy has the capability to make big plays. He's shown out against good competition on big stages, so I really like the pick of Diontae Johnson. I'm excited to see what he can do with a quarterback like Ben Roethlisberger throwing it to him. And I think that he's a guy that over time can potentially develop into a guy who can take some of the pressure off of Juju Smith-Schuster. And maybe we see a season from him like we saw from Juju 2 years ago, where everyone was doubling up on Antonio Brown. Juju was able to have this fantastic rookie season because no one was thinking about him and everyone was concerned on wide receiver 1. Maybe there's an opportunity here for him in year 1 to have that similar effect like Juju did.
Yeah, and that would be some high praise because Juju's rookie year is right up there historically with one of the better rookie years ever. Yeah. There's guys like Moss who are talking about it in terms of top 10 rookie years ever, and Juju's right up there with them and how well he played, almost in 1,000-yard season, 900 plus, right away in the NFL. Out of seemingly nowhere. He played at a much higher level competition at USC. It's a little different in that respect, but nobody was predicting Juju would have 900 plus yards in his rookie season, no matter what they say now. So that's absolutely a possibility. And again, there's going to be some depth there because despite some offhanded comments and some jabs of leadership with Ben and Jesse Washington, it certainly seemed like that there was an emergence, there was some skill there, and there could be some success there. And they have had a myriad of success with talented wide receivers going all the way back to Plesko Burris. I mean, Ben's whole career has been talented wide receivers. Now, granted, they haven't been there forever, and eventually there's some drama. And AB being there for a decade was actually longer than anybody else, and then there's going to be some drama there as well. But you're getting a lot of production out of them while they're there. Now, the only reason why this pick caught my eye is there was some concern, and there was a lot of, let's say, hoopla on Twitter. I'm going to use the word hoopla. I haven't used that in a broadcast in a while.
Hoopla is great.
Well, because there was hoopla on Twitter of Diontae Johnson ended up being the second-round selection at 66, or round 3 selection actually overall. It was the second pick. And there was conversation of Chase Winovich and maybe
Yeah.
continuing the defensive trend. And Chase Winovich would potentially have been another guy that was even more of a veteran than Devin Bush. He was back in Michigan 2014 when Harbaugh got there. He had to change positions, but the Jefferson Hills product from the WPIL, a lot of Steeler fans wanted him. He was tweeting Permanis about Devin Bush and him were going to go have a sandwich. He seemingly wanted to come here.
Yeah, exactly.
It was seemingly that there was an actual campaign kind of out of nowhere between some media members and Chase Winovich to get him in Pittsburgh, especially after Devin Bush got there, and Devin Bush even kind of trying to do a sales pitch for Chase in his media session. So they wanted that to happen. And yes, I don't know if their thinking was, we got to fill the receiver need now. We can't wait if we go Chase, and we already feel like we're getting some defensive help later in the draft. And there was a lot of depth there. They did draft linebackers later on in the draft, that maybe we'll lose out on a top flight receiver or somebody we can feel to help the offensive end. They had a lot of needs in this draft, but by bringing in Diontae Johnson, you basically drafted him instead of Chase Winovich. That pretty much is kind of what it felt like. Yeah. And you knew you were going to lose Chase if you did not take him right there. He wasn't even going to last another 10 picks, really. That was pretty much...
The Steelers picked again 6 picks later when they took Justin Lane.
Right. Well, that's... Yes.
So he wasn't... Yeah, exactly. He was not lasting much longer until their next selection.
He was not lasting much longer, and like the receiver position, they needed to bring in a corner. Those are the 2 picks that needed to happen right there. If they trade up for Devin Bush, they weren't going to get those guys where they thought in the first round, so they were getting lesser talent in terms of value, and they didn't want to wait around to a 3rd or 4th round value on those need positions either. I'm sure that was their thinking, but any I guess wish from you that they would have went Chase Winovich, especially with the fact that he did go to the Patriots, and just because this is how
always hurts.
Just because this is how Steeler football works, you know for sure there's going to be a big play that Chase Winovich will be involved with that will help the Patriots. He probably will win a championship first somehow, unless Brady somehow retires. It's going to somehow hurt the Steelers in some big game. Yeah. They start off the season actually in Week 1 in New England, watching the banner being raised with Devin Bush against Chase Winovich. That's going to be interesting. Yeah. And it would have been cool with him being a Pittsburgh product because that's incredibly rare. There's obviously a history of great talent at WPIL, at Pitt, and with the Steelers, but very rarely does that all meet together and you get a WPL product on the Steelers or vice versa. They got a Pitt guy in James Conner, but this would have been a WPAL product who would have fit a need and would have had a great connection already with a teammate in Devin Bush. Didn't happen, though.
No, and you know what? It would have been a great selection to take Winovich because I think he's a very talented pass rusher. But I think what the Steelers, what their decision was here was, we need a wide receiver more. You need more than one good wide receiver. You need more than one weapon for your quarterback that you just signed to a 3-year extension for, $60 million?
He's going to be around. Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
You need another weapon for him to throw to. And I think the Steelers also, their thought process was, there was just a run of wide receivers right before that. I mean, DK Metcalf went 2 picks earlier. Andy Isabella, who ran the fastest
DK Metcalf's a coveted.
Who ran one of the best wide receivers 40 times, was 5 picks earlier. Paris Campbell, who ran the fastest 40 time, was 3 picks before that. So there were a lot of wide receivers that went in the first 12 picks before the Steelers took Diontae Johnson. So I think they were realizing, okay, we need a wide receiver. Let's take the best one we have scouted right now and not wait any longer because all the best guys are coming off the board right now with this run at receiver. We need to take advantage of it right now when we have the opportunity. So I understand that, and I think the Steelers are also saying, all right, we already have one very talented, highly productive pass rusher in T.J. Watt. I think you can get away more in this modern NFL with having one good pass rusher as opposed to having one strong receiver, if that makes sense. I think you need more weapons offensively than you need
in today's NFL.
In today's NFL. Yeah. And also, you have a guy like Devin Bush, who you just drafted with that first round pick. He's been a good pass rusher from the middle linebacker position and a really good blitzer. So if you're trying to create pressure in other ways or in exotic ways like they've always done, the Steelers' defense, Devin Bush is a guy who can solve some of those needs for you as well as a pass rusher and as a blitzer. You can kind of line him up, honestly, wherever you want in some packages because he's that versatile. Right. So I think it was just a matter of the Steelers realizing, all right, all the wide receivers are going off the board right now. Let's take the best one available that we have scouted, and we can hold off on outside linebacker. Maybe we could find some value later in the draft, but we need to address this receiver issue right now as opposed to addressing this outside linebacker. I wouldn't even call it an issue. This maybe this opening at outside linebacker or this potential for an
Right.
outside linebacker here. I think that's what their decision was in that third round.
I think once you trade up and get Devin Bush, they pretty much were not. The Chase Winovich dream wasn't going to happen. As much as there was the Twitter hoopla, that dream kind of went away, and they probably were realizing that once they trade up and got Devin Bush. To play devil's advocate, though, I guess you could argue in terms of all the needs they had, and the fact they did say the best variable was what they wanted, not necessarily just going after needs, that maybe if they didn't trade up and get Devin Bush, and they would have maybe just drafted normal at number 20, maybe got the corner, the secondary help there in Greedy Williams, maybe then you could have got a guy and drafted Chase Winovich there, and overall the whole draft board might have filled similar needs, because Keith Butler also did tell us that even though Devin Bush is that inside linebacker help for Ryan Shazier, he's not against playing him outside. No. He's not against teaching him and having him learn and move towards the outside and getting him work into the outside. So maybe he'll get some help on the outside and that'll fix not having Chase there. But the devil advocate stance would be that you don't trade up and then you get Chase. I feel like a lot of the hoopla, though, and this is probably what they were thinking too, you can't draft with your heart. He's a Pittsburgh guy. He's from the WPIL. That's wonderful. He clearly wanted to be a Steeler. And now I'm sure he's going to be in New England. He's going to tell them, hey, I'm pissed. I wanted to go there. I was tweeting them. They didn't draft me. Let's go kick their ass. And it might happen. So, I mean, that he might become, I actually tweeted this. He went from all this hoopla. In 20 years, he might be a Pittsburgh pariah. They may hate him based on what now happens in the NFL.
Exactly.
And that's a risk. Yeah. But in terms of what makes their team better right away, especially filling the exact open needs, not necessarily maybe the luxury needs. Yeah. Devin Bush seemed to be the obvious guy that everybody knew he would fit right in with the Steelers and their current system. So once that happens, the dream just was over.
And that's absolutely right, is where you can't draft with your heart. I know it's a great story to have a guy from the Whitfield, from Pittsburgh, end up playing for the Steelers. Yeah. I mean, that's everyone's dream. That's every kid who plays football.
Including Chase Winovich's, apparently.
Exactly. That's every kid's dream that plays football and grows up a Steeler fan. They want to play for the Steelers. I mean, why wouldn't you want to play for the team that you rooted for?
Right.
I mean, that's every child's dream. But it just so happens, I mean, this is the NFL, and that's not how things work. Okay? And you know what? You got drafted anyways by, let's be honest, a great model franchise, except for some of the shady things.
Well, on the field.
On the field, a team that's been widely successful, especially over the last 20 years here. So I think it still worked out fine for him, but the Steelers, I think, made the right decision here. You don't draft with your heart. You draft by what your team needs right now, and they needed a second wide receiver or another option at wide receiver more than they needed a second pass rusher. And they already have a really good guy doing that in T.J. Watt. They have a really good guy playing wide receiver for them in Juju Smith-Schuster, but with that quarterback you just re-signed and Ben Roethlisberger for another 3 years, you need another weapon for him more than you need a guy to replace Bud Dupree for, I know who has not been fantastic, but still a guy who randomly out of the blue at times will make plays for this team.
Well, Keith Butler actually mentioned this, and this is kind of funny. It's almost like he knows he's married to Bud Dupree somehow, because out of nowhere in the conversation with us, he actually mentioned, and Bud's improving. I like Bud. Bud's improving. It's like, okay, man.
Well, that's his point. He wants to get credit to his
out of nowhere. It wasn't about Bud Dupree. Bud, just so you know, you want to write about this, Bud's improving.
Hey, and that's good for him, and maybe he is. But the Steelers, I think, at least feel comfortable enough with T.J. Watt that they can get pressure with him on the outside. At least you have pressure coming from one side better than having pressure from no sides. The Steelers, I think, realized that they were better off in that situation than they were wide receiver.
Yeah. Cale Berger, recent graduate out of the University of Pittsburgh, and it wasn't a math degree, but you did some math right there. That was good. That was good. Yeah.
I got a degree where I learned how to talk. So,
that's what we're doing here. We'll see if that works out for you. Welcome to the real world. It's not as fun.
I can already tell.
See. Mike Asti here, Pittsburgh Sports Live. Mike drops NFL draft recap of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Really, weekend of filling needs. They pretty much did that all the way from trading up for Devin Bush all the way through the back end of the draft. But they don't pick up Chase Winovich as a former Michigan teammate. Devin Bush wanted a Michigan guy. They don't do that, but they do give him a Michigan teammate. Zach Gentry here, the tight end out of Michigan. He's now a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers, going to get a lot of opportunity to replace Jesse James' production, and that was a lot of production that goes now to Detroit. They're still going to have McDonald there. There's going to now make it more of a tight end tandem situation and maybe doing some two tight end sets, and that's kind of what also was brought up, and that's maybe part of the new NFL as well. The Patriots, speaking of New England, they've had success of doing that for 15 years, really. They've kind of been on the cutting edge of that, so maybe the Steelers trying it as well. Now with Zach Gentry, with Jesse James now gone to Detroit, and then Benny Snell Jr. filling in at running back. And really, I guess I want to take this because this is a concern. The running back room now has some depth. There's some depth there, and James Conner did nothing against James Conner. He exceeded my expectations.
Yeah.
I actually lost a bet with our colleague and friend Doran Dickerson in terms of his overall touchdowns. I didn't think James Conner was going to do close to what he did last year. I didn't think he was going to get close to what he did.
Doran's got to ride with Pitt.
I know, and I think Doran did ride with the Pitt guy, and then just happened to accidentally fall into the victory of the bet.
Oh, I don't know about that.
But I will give him the bet win anyway, because a lot of those touchdowns were early on in the season, and I think Doran was a little bit surprised, like I was. But regardless, Pro Bowl season for James Conner. Fumble-rooski a little bit, though, fumble prone, as well as not healthy, so they needed the protection. Benny Snell Jr. can provide that. Zach Gentry providing the replacement for Jesse James in all intents and purposes. What are your thoughts on those selections and what the rest of the Steelers did offensively? Especially, is there a concern for you the running back room is very, very young, and do they need a D'Angelo Williams veteran type? This is an average age running back room of 22 and a half. That's incredibly youthful in the NFL.
I don't have a problem with the youth in the running back room because, especially in James Conner, but also in Benny Snell Jr., these are veteran guys. These aren't guys that redshirted 1 year and then played a year in college and went to the draft. I mean, James Conner was, 5 years at Pitt or so?
Yeah.
Benny Snell Jr., I believe, was a redshirt junior, so he was there 4 years at Kentucky. These are both mature guys, and they're also...
Maturity, though, in general is different than maturity in the NFL.
Sure, but they're also both natural-born leaders. They've been leaders out their entire football careers.
Right.
So I think those guys will be able to lead from within, and you're not going to get a lot of... I think those guys will lead from within that group, and I think that they will all bring each other up and bring each other along. I don't think you necessarily need an older veteran presence. I think those guys are gonna make themselves work. They're gonna motivate themselves. The word I was looking for. I don't think you're gonna need a veteran presence in that room because I think those guys are all just high quality individuals. I think in that locker room.
Okay.
Regardless.
Is there enough production on the field?
What I will say though, what I was gonna get to is that. I love Benny Snell Jr. I thought he was an absolute stud at Kentucky. He was a tank. He was there's one I forget what game it was, but they give him the ball on like the 5-yard line and get stuffed like 2 yards in the backfield and just carries like 4 people, including 2 linebackers and a D end, into the end zone. I mean, this guy is an absolute horse. But that being said, so is James Conner.
Right.
So was a little confused or flummoxed as to why.
Flummoxed, that's nice.
Gotcha.
That's a college term.
Yeah. So I was a little flummoxed as to why they decided to get a guy that was pretty much the exact same carbon copy kind of player of James Conner. I thought it would have been nice for them to get more of a change of pace guy.
Right.
Maybe a smaller, quicker, speedier guy as opposed to more of a workhorse like James Conner is.
What the hope would have been to see Bell and Conner play together.
That was the dream.
Right there was exactly what you're describing. That did not occur.
But yeah, Le'Veon Bell, he wasn't some little guy either.
Right.
He was a powerhouse. He just played with.
He was just a freak athlete.
And he played with a finesse style. So I was a little confused as to why they decided to get a guy who's the exact same type of player as James Conner. But still, I think they can both be productive. And I think we've also seen that with this group of Steelers offensive linemen that is pretty intact, just as it's been for the last 5-6 years or so, I think anyone can have success behind this line. It was Le'Veon Bell, it was D'Angelo Williams, it was James Conner then now this past year. I mean, I think what we're seeing is it's the strength of this run-blocking scheme and these offensive linemen, in addition to the talent of the running backs, of why the Steelers are able to run the ball so effectively. So I think that whoever you put behind there is going to have some semblance of success. I mean, even Jalen Samuels.
I was going to bring that up. He had success. He had spotty success. Yes. Absolutely, yeah. So he's in the room.
I really like Benny Snell Jr. He's a mature guy. He's a leader. And
contrary to Bell's opinion and his camp's opinion, that's correct.
Yeah,
what Cale's saying right now.
And he was highly productive. that was the only thing is that he was a similar style to James Conner, but I really like the pick. I like Benny Snell Jr. as a player, and I think it's a given that we're going to see James Conner probably not play 16 games. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's
no running back
right.
in the NFL.
Nobody does,
but especially James Conner, a guy who's been pretty banged up, I guess, throughout his career. Back to Pitt. And
yeah, and there's a concern, not even
NFL.
just the individual seasons, that it's probably unlikely you're going to get 5-6 more years overall.
That's the
I
thing.
mean,
So
how long is his career going to be? Maybe
Yeah.
shorter than the normal running back shelf life, which is already short.
So if that's the type of style of running back you want, then Benny Snell is perfect because he can fit right into the role and play the same style of ball that James Conner will. I just think that it would have probably been more advantageous for this offense if they would have went for a guy who can be more of a receiving threat, be a guy more on the perimeter, a speedier guy, a quicker guy that can make people miss. But still, I like the pick. I like Benny Snell Jr., the man also. I think it was a solid pick.
Did any of this happen where they still got quality players that are filling needs that could be productive, but they didn't get the ideal guys necessarily because of the trading up for Devin Bush? Should they fall back in their situation for all these other guys to get Devin Bush? Did that affect the rest of the draft, which maybe goes into an argument, devil's advocate again, that maybe if they would have just stayed in order, they would have got the best at those spots? Maybe different picks the rest of the way through. How much did that impact the draft, I guess is the easiest way to ask.
I don't think it really impacted that much, and I don't think that they really, we both agree they didn't give up a ton.
No, they did not. No,
either.
they did not.
For some reason, the national media is not ripping the Broncos and John Elway. That's because everyone.
Yeah, we
loves
talked
John
about that
Elway.
off the show. I don't know. They must love John Elway because
I think
the
everyone
Broncos
loves John
fixed
Elway.
no needs. They have Joe Flacco, who's a question mark, and they gave up. They didn't really get much.
They gave up an opportunity to get. Well, first of all, they gave an.
They could have drafted Devin Bush.
They gave an opportunity to get Devin Bush, which was also a need for them.
Yeah, they could have drafted Devin Bush. That would have been fine.
They did in that spot. They didn't take. They didn't take Dwayne Haskins
Yeah,
either
there
when
you
they
go.
needed a quarterback. They ended up. I think they ended up getting a quarterback in the end. They got Drew Lock.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so they ended up getting a pretty solid quarterback, but I think they had an opportunity to get probably the second best or up there.
Yeah, there's question marks.
Unless you're
yeah.
talking to Dave Gettleman. I mean, they had one of the best quarterbacks. They could have taken at that pick and they didn't get it. But regardless.
Yeah, actually, I gotta say, I'm happy that not only did you have your little weekend of fun graduating and probably had to recover from some celebrating there,
Sure.
but also that Cale is still with us because there was concern that there was a concern he might not even have made it to graduation due to the heart attack he almost had at Walnut Grill when the Giants drafted Daniel Jones and not Dwayne Haskins. You had to leave your chair. You fell over, I believe.
I definitely had to take a step.
You almost were choking on some pretzel bites.
Some delicious pretzel bites.
Yeah.
But I certainly had to take a step back and collect myself because it was just so. Listen, I know Kyler Murray is a fantastic talent and he's unbelievably exciting to watch, and
Right.
he was the Heisman Trophy winner. But
Right.
if we're looking at who is probably the best prototypical quarterback and most NFL ready quarterback
Right.
in this draft,
Yeah.
it was Dwayne Haskins.
NFL ready
And
is
if
the
you
key.
didn't think it was Dwayne Haskins, you're an idiot. And for some reason, Dave Gettleman thought that Daniel Jones from Duke, a guy who got blown out like 59-7 in one of his last final games in college.
His total
against
touchdown
Wake
passes
Forest,
were the same as some of Dwayne Haskins' single
Dwayne
seasons.
Haskins in one season as a starter
There you go.
had like 50 touchdown
There you
passes,
go.
and Daniel Jones didn't have that in 2 years as a starter, 3
yeah,
years as a starter.
like
so
54,
and
yeah.
sometimes that's a function of the offense, whatever.
Right.
But I think regardless, I think it was widely agreed upon that Daniel Jones is a future backup. And Daniel Jones is a guy who was a third, fourth round pick, a guy that you get to, I guess, fill a backup role in your quarterback room, and maybe he develops into an okay NFL starter. Maybe he turns into Case Keenum. That's fine. But
Yeah.
I think Dwayne Haskins was the best, straight up the best quarterback prospect in this draft, and I think the Giants made an incredible mistake not taking him.
Okay.
And you know what? He ended up getting.
So the Giants are your biggest loser. We'll get that out of the way.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I will say, as much as I think that was a really horrible pick, I thought they could have had an excellent draft if they would have just taken Dwayne Haskins there.
Okay.
Or if they would have just taken any other quarterback.
Yeah, I think that's really the point. I could see, as much as I was in agreement that Haskins was the top most NFL ready quarterback from what he did at Ohio State and with Urban Meyer and in that offense, you could have an argument that maybe there's a concern with guys like that play with a Hall of Fame coach, that never lose any games, that are in the top team of the conference, that maybe you'd rather have a guy that goes through some battle testing wounds, that has everything handed to him with the best talent, the best receivers, the best conference, the almost went undefeated if it wasn't for the game against Purdue.
But
maybe you don't want that.
But this has been the same wide receiver group for the last 4 years, and you look at what J.T. Barrett did as a passer,
Right.
those same wide receivers.
It took the arm talent, it took the skill of Dwayne Haskins to unleash those guys and get a few of those guys drafted.
True, yeah.
And Paris Campbell and Terry McLaurin, who was a third-round pick.
I think
for
also the
Washington
funniest
Redskins.
thing is the fact that the Redskins drafted Haskins, and based on what he's literally said, he is going to gun for the Giants because he is well aware that
And it's great
that he was
ended up in the
snubbed.
same division, a team that they
Well, that's what I'm
play
saying. Now-
two times a year from now on, but I think
He
the
said league
Giants-
messed up. I think it's more Gettleman messed up.
Yeah, and I think the Giants. I think the Giants had an okay draft outside of that mishap,
Okay.
but I think if they would have even just not taken a quarterback with number 6, I think people wouldn't be as angry with them, and I certainly wouldn't be as angry with them. I think the problem
You were angry.
the problem is that they took Daniel Jones.
Yeah,
It
that's
isn't
what I'm
the problem
saying.
that they took a quarterback. I mean, it's the problem that they took a quarterback that wasn't Dwayne Haskins or Drew Lock or anyone else because there were so many other quarterbacks that were ranked and are clearly better than Daniel Jones.
I could have made an argument, and he didn't. I could argue this was a little bit of an underwhelming draft for Will Grier and the Mountaineers based on where they were
Will Grier is
projected
better
coming
quarterback
in.
than Daniel Jones.
That's what I was going to say. That you could argue, and Sills ended up not even getting drafted and being signed by the Bills. You could argue for all the fanfare around a lot of those number 1 draft picks the Mountaineers had the last few years. They didn't really get the fruit of that labor. They had a lot of overall players that were drafted, but not really the Will Grier 3rd round instead of 1st round. But again, I would have maybe been more comfortable with Will Grier than a Daniel Jones. And if they're gonna, as much as you want to draft a guy immediately when you like him, so that's why you want to draft Haskins at 6. You don't want to wait around to 17, even though they had a later pick. If it's Daniel Jones, I might wait around. Like you could have got Jones at 17 and drafted somebody else at 6, and
Here's
they had some talent.
I
but-
think they had a good draft because at 17 they take Dexter Lawrence, the phenomenal defensive tackle from Clemson, to shore
Yeah.
up that defensive line. They take at 30, they trade back into the 1st round and get the cornerback from Georgia, Diontae Berger, one of the top corner prospects. But the problem is if they just would have went best available here and maybe like a lot of other teams decided we'll wait till next year to get our quarterback of the future when it's Justin Herbert, when it's Tua, when it's
True.
those guys coming out, and they just took best available, they could have had Josh Allen, they could have had Ed Oliver, they could have had Devin Bush, they
Yeah,
could have
Devin
had
Bush.
Sean Gary, they could have had Jonah Williams, the tackle from Alabama, they could have even had Christian Wilkins, the defensive tackle from the other defensive tackle from Clemson. So there were so many good players there that were best available. They would have, if they would have taken them in that situation, would have, I guess, made things okay. Because even though you didn't get a quarterback, you still got a great player with that 6th pick, and you could have still done everything later on in the draft and traded
Yeah,
up
that's what I mean. They
and
could have
still
got
got those other guys. It's
Yeah.
the problem that you took a quarterback, and it was probably the worst possible quarterback option you could have taken in that situation.
Yeah.
No disrespect to Daniel Jones, but he's a nice guy.
Yeah, and I'm a little disappointed with Will Grier going to the Panthers. I mean, it could work out for him well. Maybe Cam Newton won't be fully healthy, but it feels like you're having a younger guy you're waiting behind. He would have been better off going to the Saints than with Drew Brees being older. I mean, this is going to be unlikely now that he can actually get as an opportunity as an NFL starter with the first team that drafts him. He'll probably have to wait and go somewhere else, and maybe you blame the Giants for ruining the entire board.
Quickly here about Gentry, because we didn't talk about Gentry, the tight end from Michigan.
Yeah,
was
go
the
ahead.
5th round pick.
Yeah. Giants can
I
sign.
like him as a receiver. I think he runs really crisp routes. He's 6'8", so he's great size. He's athletic. He's a former quarterback. My only concerns with him, though, he doesn't have great hands. He has a tendency to bring it into the body, and he has some really cringeworthy concentration drops on
Okay.
tape if you look back, which
Okay.
obviously, as a fan and as just a general spectator, you hate to see when a guy just drops a wide open
Right.
pass on something.
You don't want
But
that, no.
Guys have them, but he has a few of those on the tape as well. And with his big frame, he does need to put on some more weight, though. He's a little lean in the legs, and he could probably put on some more some strength in the upper body when it comes to blocking. He could become a better blocker.
He's tall.
Exactly.
That was brought
He's
up.
just
yeah.
tall, and
He's
that's
tall
part
and
of the
lanky,
problem.
yeah.
Is he needs to get stronger to become an effective blocker because he's not going to get that low center of gravity like maybe some other guys would. But I think he has the potential where he can turn into a good blocker and turn into a pretty solid tight end for them. I think what they needed to do, though, was, and I think this is what they did end up doing a good job of, and I think we talked about this where we were saying, would tight end be an option for the Steelers in the 1st round? before we knew they were going to trade up to get Devin Bush, and I said,
Yeah, the Lions draft the first tight end, which is the oddest
Which
thing.
is
They're going to
weird.
go 2 tight end sets, clearly, but they signed Jesse James in free agency, and then they draft
but
tight
you
end
know
out of
what?
Iowa.
You only draft a tight end in today's NFL that high is if he is like a wide receiver 1, if he is a
Right.
phenomenal receiving threat. And
Yeah, if he's a
the
Gronk.
Steelers, exactly. If he's a Gronk, I think Hawkinson is going to be a pretty good tight end. He's definitely a good receiver. You only take a top tight end like that if he is a weapon offensively.
Right.
If you need a blocking tight end like the Steelers need, you pick him way back.
Oh,
then
yeah.
Because the top tight end prospects are going to be the ones who are like wide receiver 1s, who are great pass catchers, who are great route runners. Those are the guys going high. If you just need a guy who's going to be a great run blocker for you, you can get that value in the 5th round.
Yeah,
And I think
right.
the Steelers lost their fantastic run blocker in Jesse James. I probably would have liked them to see. I don't know, who it would have been, but I don't think Zach Gentry right now is a good enough run blocker that you can put him in a situation with Vance McDonald, who's clearly his main purpose is to be a pass catching threat.
Right.
I don't think they got maybe the value they could have gotten better value that late in the draft for a guy that would have filled their needs for more of a blocking tight end when they already have a guy who's a pretty strong receiver.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern. And the Lions' offense is going to be very, very interesting, and with Stafford now back and seeing what they're doing. But yeah,
when they pick Gentry, that's the point in the draft where you're getting any tight end you want that's a good blocker that maybe isn't
Yeah, they
that great
weren't-
of a pass catcher.
right.
Because if you're a phenomenal pass catcher or tight end, you're going early.
yeah, whether it's fair or not, that's
If you're not, you're going late.
Chicks
because-
like the receivers, even if you're a tight end, and that you're going to get
That's
you're going to
the
get the stats and you're
Yeah.
going to get the numbers. And when anybody asks you who's the greatest tight ends of all time, they're giving you Tony Gonzalez, Shannon Sharp, maybe even Gronk now. They're Kellen Joe Sr. It's all because of offense and the receptions and
exactly.
where they are historically in terms of yards and catches. It's not necessarily because of them as the blockers. Those guys I just mentioned, with the exception of Gronk, didn't really block that much in their careers, but had a lot of the numbers.
Gronk was great at both.
No,
He
well,
was
that's what I mean.
phenomenal.
With the exception of Gronk, the rest of them
Okay,
didn't
yes,
block. Yeah,
yes,
with the
yeah.
exception of I did a whole show a while ago and argued Gronk, for overall work in his short condensed amount of time with the injuries, was the greatest tight end of all time.
Yeah, absolutely,
But
unquestioned.
but anyway, as
dominant.
certainly the Sandy Koufax of tight ends. If you want to be a baseball nerd and go back historically on that one,
But that's my take on Gentry though. Is that I think that he has room to grow, but if you needed a guy that was going to be your run blocker,
Right.
in addition to Vance McDonald, and you probably could have gotten
kind of
somebody else
goes
at
back
that
to what you were saying about Snell, though. These are great players that are going to help the team, but do they really complement the need, or do they either fit
the
a
thing.
similar
That's
need
the
and
thing.
maybe you're not really filling a need because these guys are not going to do exactly what is the open thing that they needed
I would put it this
done.
way: they got the position.
Right, there
They
you go.
didn't get the correct style of that position.
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you for helping me out there with the description.
Gotcha.
As we round things out here, though, Cale Berger, Mike Asti, NFL draft recap here in this edition of Mike Drop on Pittsburgh Sports Live, brought to you by Beaver County Auto and even Walnut Grill, where we had there's the sign, where we had our NFL draft show. So thanks again to Walnut Grill. We will be back in the future, and we will once again appreciate the brisket nachos and the pretzel bites. Maybe even try the rest of the appetizers, calamari too. Big fan of the calamari. Not everybody likes
Listen,
that. I do.
I've never had calamari with the hot cherry peppers or banana
That was nice.
peppers. Game changer.
Yeah, you don't
Game
always
changer
get that no
with
matter
my-
where you go. And
my
that's,
calamari.
yeah, absolutely.
Game changer.
Absolutely. So hit up the Walnut Grill in Robinson on Settlers Ridge, next to one of the nicest grocery stores I've ever been in the Market District out there. And I've been in grocery stores all over the place. You could hang out there for 8 hours.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
give them some free publicity because they're nearby. But the rest of the Steelers draft, I mean, you're getting Isaiah Buggs, you're getting Ulysses Gilbert, you're getting more defensive help there. You mentioned before the show that Derwin Gray, you liked out of Maryland, who I believe was their last selection out of the 7th round. What did the Steelers do the rest of the way? Sutton Smith too, who was a guy that I talked to him in his little conference call, that he said that Northern Illinois is the only college that wanted him out of high school, that was it, that was his only opportunity, and that he felt like he should have been drafted earlier in this draft. He feels like he was spurned. He feels like he has a chip on his shoulder again, and those type of players are absolutely who you want around. He is motivated. He is self-motivated. He also knows Devin Bush personally, so that's interesting. So the rest of the draft, how do you feel it shook out for the Steelers?
Well, I like the Sutton Smith pick. I think you get some pretty good value there in the 6th round with him. I think he's a pretty solid pass rusher. I don't have a lot of, obviously, knowledge of Sutton Smith. I don't think
Well,
anyone really
Northern Illinois?
did.
No, I don't think
Out
so.
of
No.
Northern Illinois.
No.
Clearly, no other colleges had very
Yeah,
much
nobody else.
knowledge.
I mean, it's not our fault. No
Yeah.
scouts or coaches had much information on the man.
But I think that where they already decided to pass up on the top level talent at outside linebacker, I think this is just an opportunity of a guy with, like you said, that chip on his shoulder, that gritty mentality. Who maybe he can come in and earn his way onto the roster, and who knows, maybe they found a gem in the 6th round. But I do like the pick because if you were going to
Yeah.
go later, you might as well just take a chance on the guy on the later round, and hopefully he can turn into a producer for you. I don't
Right.
think there's any problem with that. Isaiah Buggs. If you're drafting a defensive lineman from Alabama, there's a good chance that he's probably going to be pretty good, or at least be able to contribute for you in some way, because like Clemson, they just have the platoon mentality where they just
Yeah.
churn out guys every year, or they have a 7-man rotation at defensive line in the game, so everyone's getting opportunities, everyone
And
can play at that
that's
elite level.
coaching too, because it's not even so
Exactly.
much that obviously he played for Hall of Fame coach Nick Saban, but he played for a coach that has had NFL coaching experience, even though it didn't work out in Miami, and a coach that is gonna be. You're not having fun. I mean, you're winning championships, but he's treating you like a professional and
Exactly.
perfectionist, whether you're the first guy or all the way down the roster.
So regardless of the abilities of Isaiah Buggs, he's playing for one of the best programs in college football, one of the best coaches, and the pedigree of Alabama, I think, is enough to
It's safe,
to
yeah.
warrant and say, a solid pick.
Yeah.
But the other guy, though, I don't have a ton of information on Ulysses Gilbert. For the last week.
You want to say Grant, don't you?
I keep wanting to call him Ulysses S. Grant.
I almost did actually as well, and then I caught
Anyone
myself.
named-
That's why I stuttered on it.
Anyone named Ulysses, you would have just assumed, president.
Right, no, I'm sorry, it's Gilbert.
But I think that's another just example of getting
The
depth.
third.
Yeah, the third. I think
Put it
that's
on the jersey. Is that going to be on the jersey?
better be.
Okay.
If you have a hyphenated name, or you're a junior, you're a fourth, you have to put it on your
That's
jersey.
fair, that's fair.
Or you're wasting it.
Yeah.
But I just think that's another example of getting depth at the position. So another guy that can potentially be a contributor, we'll see. But
Okay.
I think they just kind of decided more at outside linebacker or linebacker in general. Let's go more with depth in the back end of this draft so that we have more bodies, we have more options, just in case one guy jumps out ahead of the pack. Turns out to be a gem in that later point of the draft, so no problem with that. And then Derwin Gray, I think you might as well. You did lose. Blanking right now. The tackle for the Steelers, the right tackle, who left in free agency.
Oh, this year?
Yes,
Actually, I think it's escaping me as well. But
from Texas. Regardless,
Yeah, I get your point.
the right tackle left in free agency. They'll probably have another guy step into that spot, but I think it's still important to have depth at offensive line. And if you can get value in that later round, to have other guys that you can plug and play, I think Derwin Gray has had experience playing tackle, some guard, and he's a guy that was at Maryland 4 years, or that played for 4 years. So a veteran guy, an experienced guy, a smart guy, clearly, because he's played for that long, and he's got to have some experience at that point. I think it's a solid pick getting Derwin Gray. At that point of the draft,
Yeah.
you get some depth, you get some value. No problem with that at all.
All right, well then there's only one thing left to do. And again, we really probably can't properly do this because we need to give these guys 3 or 5 years, but that's not really how the NFL works today, and these coaches are not going to get that much time, and after all the drama and all the pressure from last year and the fact that the division is still kind of open, regardless of what Cleveland Browns fans may want to tell you this next season, you're not going to have 3 to 5 years to wait around, so these maturation processes are going to have to speed up, but everybody does it, so we're going to do the same. Your draft grade for the Pittsburgh Steelers 2019 NFL Draft, and it filled a lot of needs. There were some question marks there where there was a surprise of trading up for Devin Bush. We're only, this is recording on Monday, so we're only a few days away from when Devin Bush was selected, and we're only a couple days away from the end of the entire draft, closing out on Saturday. But where are you at right now on the Monday morning quarterbacking letter grade for the 2019 NFL Draft?
I'm going to give them, let's see here. I didn't think I would have to think about grades anymore now that I'm finally
I'm sorry.
graduated.
Last one ever for your life will be asked by my custody.
Until next year. I'm going to give the Steelers a B+.
Okay.
I really like what they did with this draft. I think the biggest thing, obviously, that's driving up that grade is the Devin Bush pick, which I loved coming in. I did the bulk of the research on Devin Bush going into the draft day.
It worked out conveniently for you. You did a bulk of research on it.
Yeah,
this was like your guys.
Yeah, and Justin Lane as well.
There you go. I had Greedy Williams, but didn't work out. So.
Exactly. So I really like the Devin Bush pick, and I liked the Steelers. They didn't wait around. Seems like a different tone for the Steelers front office that they said, They identified a guy and they did what they had to do to move up and get him, which I commend because that's not something I think we've seen traditionally from the Steelers since Troy Polamalu.
Yeah.
So commend them for doing that, for being aggressive and getting the player that identified as their guy. I love when teams do that, and I think they did a great job of doing that in this draft. And I think they got some solid talent in the third round at corner with Justin Lane. I think he can be a contributor. He needs some work, but I think he can be a guy that, like under the tutelage of Joe Hayden, and obviously Mike Tomlin, too, is a former defensive backs coach. Yeah. I think he's under good hands, that he can turn into a solid player for them. I really like his tape at Michigan State. I think Diontae Johnson is a solid receiver. I think they got the best receiver they could in that situation. And like I talked about, I give them a lot of credit and a lot of leeway when it comes to drafting wide receivers because they've been so successful. They have the track record. I can't think of a front office that's been better at drafting receivers over the last 10 years or so
I mean, this is
than the Steelers.
Yeah.
So I give them the benefit of the doubt. What I've seen from him on tape, his performances against teams like the University of Miami on big stages, he's shown out. So I like what I've seen from Diontae Johnson. And then the 6th round, 7th round picks, that's, kind of...
Yeah, it's almost gravy.
It's kind of gravy. But what I will say about 4th and 5th and Benny Snell and Zach Gentry, they fulfilled needs. I'm just not sure if they picked the right type of guys, the right type of players at those positions to specifically fill the needs they have. I like Benny Snell Jr. a lot, but they probably should have went with a more change of pace, a quicker, smaller running back. Okay. And for Zach Gentry, they probably should have went with more of a run-blocking tight end. But like I said, and like you said still, they fulfilled needs in those first 5 picks. They fulfilled needs and got some depth later on. So for that, I'm going to say B+.
I'm going to give it a B- for kind of what you're saying now. It still was an adequate draft, and I do like the aggressiveness of a team that is still in win-now mode and wanting to go get a guy in Devin Bush who, if they're claiming they've been coveting him for years and he was the worst-kept secret and he knew about it too, then they had to go get him. He fit right in, and they did go get him. And they didn't have to give up that much to make it happen. They were able to use, which Alan Saunders' article on SteelersNow.com, you can read about it there. They were able to use the departures of Antonio Brown and even Le'Veon Bell to help bolster this draft and use those picks properly, even though some argued they didn't get enough out of the AB trade. I argued it too, only getting a 3rd and 5th, but they were able to use that situation to bring in a guy like Devin Bush and to help the top of their draft. I think the reason why it's a B at least is because Devin Bush seemingly is who they wanted and is the absolute best available, not only filling a need for that slot. You got to give him a props there, and it also feels like he'll end up working out with that coaching staff. But even if he doesn't, that's who they had to get in that position. Same thing with Diontae Johnson. Like you, though, and based kind of what you're saying, you almost talked me out of the B+. When you have the 4th and 5th, they're filling needs. The rest of the draft is gravy, but 4th and 5th, they're filling needs. The tight end, running back, you needed the depth for Connor. You need to replace Jesse James. But are you really getting that depth, or are you really replacing that production if you're getting guys that don't actually fill the necessary role that was open, even if they play the same position? And this is how you judge it in 3 to 5 years. If Benny Snell Jr. and Zach Gentry don't work out, and you don't get at least a couple seasons of productivity, even if they're not Pro Bowlers, as long as they are helping you win and can be contributors and you get some solid seasons, then it's a B+, if not an A draft. If not, then the draft is hurt, and you can't just say Devin Bush is enough to make it a B+ by itself.
Yeah, how I would classify the 4th and 5th round pick for the Steelers and Snell and Gentry, I would say those were both picks for depth, but not picks for satisfying needs. And I think that's what that's what probably would bring it down to for me, because I did think it was an excellent draft. But what I'm just saying is, those guys they in theory they bring in depth. You have more players at those positions. I just don't think they did enough to diversify those positions by getting guys that are different from the players that they already have at those spots.
Okay, you can tell he's fresh out of college too. Diversify a lot of vocab terms. Your teacher should watch these shows.
Hey man.
Everyone will watch. Everyone should watch, but especially Cale's former teachers, former professors now at Pitt. They're still there. Cale's gone, and you can use these shows to teach the next generation. How about that?
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, Cale, thanks for joining me here.
Thank you for having me.
Being a part of the Steelers Now family here during the draft coverage, and for jumping aboard Walnut Grill and enjoying the pretzel bites. Props again to Walnut Grill for having us out there and keeping us after closing time. Steelers trading up and getting Devin Bush kind of helped things for you as well as helping things for us, because it allowed us not to be there too long and having the argument of whether we could stay till midnight or not. Didn't have to be an issue. Yeah. So thanks to the Steelers for doing that and helping us all out. That show can be found, Pittsburgh Sports Live, on the YouTube channel, as well as pghsportslive.com on the website. And, of course, this and all of our content, that's Steelers related, as this is the centric of this particular broadcast here, recapping the 2019 NFL Draft for the Steelers. Everything can be found, and I'll put it up here. There's a lot of our content. There's what we did at Walnut Grill. And then there you go. Parker Hurley's 5 winners from the draft. Weekend, they're already on the Steelers roster. That's one of the main featured articles. The rest of the Steelers covered there with videos, interviews from my time at the facility this weekend and enjoying food and talking to those guys. And then the rest of our coverage throughout the NFL draft and continuing on now full-fledged into the Steelers off season and then going on to training camp, potential shows there and etc. We also do want to make it clear that we now have a new addition here. Ron Lipka, the author, who's interviewed 650 former Steelers, current Steelers, former players, former coaches, whole myriad of Steelers personnel over the years, including Mike Hilton and Company, which I believe right now was posted while we were recording this on SteelersNow.com. So Ron is now a part. Steelers Takeaways is where you previously could find his work. Still going to be there, but now joining the Steelers Now fold at Pittsburgh Sport. On Twitter is where you can follow him, Ron Lipka, famous author here in terms of interviewing Steelers, former players, coaches, and personnel, and as well as some of the current ones. He's now a part of Steelers Now as well. And you can find all of it at SteelersNow.com. So for Cale Berger, I'm Mike Asti. Again, also, always thanks to Beaver County Auto there for the sponsorship on the sign there. I will move my head there. There's the pointing, because you were pointing right at me previously.
A lot of pointing in this episode.
Yeah, a lot of pointing there. But Beaver County Auto, Walnut Grill, everybody else, SteelersNow.com. And the Steelers, yeah, it's hard to complain too much, even though Steeler fans will. They had a draft that's relatively what you would have expected. It did fill the needs. Nothing was perfect by any means, but in terms of the situation, I think they had a great draft, and no draft is ever going to be perfect. You could argue no team should ever get an A+ in a draft 2 days later, because we don't know things until 3 or 5 years later. So when I threw up the poll question, and that was what you people were saying, I know, but we got to do this anyway, so bear with me. That's all we got, though, for this one. Check back with us, Pittsburgh Sports Live on the YouTube channel. Make sure to click on the subscribe button there to make it easier for us to get this content to you. Hit up pghsportslive.com as well as Pittsburgh Sports Now for the family of networks and SteelersNow.com.